The Eastern Conference Finals start tonight. We're going to preview the 2027 Eastern Conference Finals, why the Orlando Magic and Detroit Pistons are running the same race today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 20th. It will be May 21st, 2025. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com, credentialed member of the Orlando Magic media since the 2011 season, I believe, 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. It's been a long time. I would cover the Magic for a long time. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, our 2027 Eastern Conference Finals preview begins 2 years early. Calling my shot. Freezing cold, take me later. We'll have Khahil of Locked On Pistons on the show. We'll talk about how the Pistons rebuilt themselves into a playoff team, what they can learn from the Magic, what the Magic can learn from the Pistons, and where these two teams fit into a vastly different Eastern Conference. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic your first listen of the day. For those of you that listen to Locked On Magic every day, we truly appreciate our everyday crew for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. The Locked On Magic, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I don't want to waste a lot of time. I had a really good conversation with Khahil. I am jokingly calling this a 2027 Eastern Conference Finals preview. Who knows if the Magic or Pistons will get there? The conference finals are very, very tough, very, very rare thing for a lot of teams. Maybe not so much for the Pistons after what they did in the early 2000s. But I wanted to do this episode because I've sensed from a lot of Magic fans, and I honestly believe this too, the Magic want to have the kind of transformative offensive offseason that the Pistons had last year. The Pistons went out, they signed Malik Beasley, volume three-point shooter, ended up making, I think, the second most threes in the league this year behind Anthony Edwards, excellent three-point shooter as well. They added a nice veteran, Tobias Harris. In addition to hiring JP Bickerstaff, who we know is an excellent coach, it completely changed the Pistons' culture and outlook and radically changed their defense. Much the same way the Pistons last year had the season the Magic had 2 seasons ago, 2024. And so I think for the Pistons, there's a lot that they're going to learn from what the Magic did or didn't do this offseason. And of course, with the Eastern Conference feeling completely wide open, the Pistons and the Magic, their young players are about the same age. The Magic are going to be competing with the Pistons for their spot in the playoff pecking order for the next 4 or 5 years, during the length of the Cade Cunningham extension, the length of the Franz Wagner extension. And so this is a team that we're going to be seeing a lot, going through very similar journey, coming out of the rebuild morass at very much the same time. So I wanted to get Koo, who does an excellent job covering Locked On Pistons. Go check them out if you have a chance. I want to get his perspective on how the Pistons built this, what he thinks of the Magic, what the Magic can teach them, and the Eastern Conference in general. Let's get to that coming up here in just a moment. And this is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, for those of you on Locked On Pistons, joined by the great host of Locked On Pistons, Khahil. Koo, it is always good to have you on the show. Hopefully I am not getting hate for what happened in January because everyone was sad by that. Everyone was upset by that, Cole especially. But Koo, crazy season for you guys, right? We know, like, Magic fans know the experience of that first return to the playoffs from last year. How was that experience for you guys? Let's start there. What was the playoffs like for you, bud?
Yeah, I think it was absolutely amazing. The crowd that was there for the Pistons in Little Caesars Arena was off the charts. I thought the crowd did. I thought the atmosphere in Little Caesars Arena was way, like, 10 times as good as I thought it would be. It was truly an environment that I have never been a part of before. It was crazy. It was so good, I had to make sure my wife got to go to Game 6. I was credentialed for Game 6, but then I bought her separate tickets to be able to go by herself for Game 6. That's how electric I thought the environment was. I wanted to make sure she got to experience it. So the environment itself was amazing. Seeing these young guys get to the playoffs after having a 14-win season last year, 28 games in a row of losses, like, it was a horrid season last year for the Pistons, and then to follow it up with a playoff debut and winning 2 games, breaking the playoff win drought that extended all the way to when Chauncey Billups was on the team still. Like breaking all those things within the same season while maintaining hope for the future, feeling like you have that franchise guy, like the best is yet to come. This wasn't an all-in year with some older guys. It's like, okay, well, where do you go from here? It feels like the best is yet to come still. I think this was probably the most exciting and most entertaining season for Pistons fans since like the going to work teams. And that was like, I was 10 years old at that point. So it certainly was a fun year.
Yeah, Magic fans have some nightmares of those going to work teams way back in the day. Like Magic fans can relate. Like last year, not this past season, but the 2024 season, being back in the playoffs, taking Cleveland to 7. To me, there is nothing more fun than a team learning to win for the first time. Like that is just the most like pure, like distilled experience of fun, because there's no expectations. You just take everything as gravy. But the Pistons getting to the playoffs after a 14-win season, obviously health has a big thing to do with that. Cade Cunningham being healthy for the entire season. We all knew he was a star in waiting. It was just a matter of him being on the court healthy and having the surrounding pieces. But it really felt like Detroit put a lot of this together almost in one offseason. Obviously, you get a new coach. The coaching situation was what it was. JB Bickerstaff is an excellent coach for young teams. He proved that in Cleveland, proved that again in Detroit. What impact did the offseason signings, like people ragged on Detroit for signing Tobias Harris and giving him the money that they gave him. And I remember sitting there thinking like, no, Tobias is a good, solid veteran. He's going to give them stability. They added some great shooting in Malik Beasley. They took a chance on Tim Hardaway Jr. What impact did those veterans have on, I don't know if changing the culture of the team is the right way, but like kind of setting them up for the success?
No, well, they definitely changed the culture. I don't think you're wrong there. The culture was not where you wanted it to be before the season. And Tobias, Malik, THA, Paul Reed, even these guys helped change this culture and help this play. I mean, I remember being at the introductory press conferences before the training camp even started. I think it was like the day before training camp, whatever they do those. And Marcus Sasser, one of the first things he said was, I've never had vets like this. The environment, the atmosphere around this team right now has never been like this before. I've never had vets that actually care about me off the floor. And they're like, we're playing video games together, blah, blah. I know that stuff seems like corny or whatever. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't really matter. I think it truly does. I mean, this culture completely changed. And I think that really the closeness of this team and like the culture in the locker room really I thought carried over to the basketball team on the court and carried over to their success. So I think that was a huge part. When it comes to this basketball wise, the crazy thing is that I know a lot of people like to look at the Pistons now and be like, oh, they have this fun young core. They got Cade, they have Asar, they have Duren, they have Ivy. This is not how people were talking about them last year. Like last offseason, it was not, oh, the Pistons have this fun young core. It was, well, is Jane Ivy even good? Is Jalen Duren even good? Can Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson even play together? Is Asar even good?
There were questions of, is Cade even worth the max?
Yeah, like
it
when
seems crazy.
Yeah, when Cade signed that contract, it was like, oh, did they pay too soon? Did they overpay him? Is he even worth that much? Then they draft Ron Holland, and it's, oh, how are you going to play Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren all together? Like this core doesn't make sense. Why are they doing this? So I understand that people look at it now like, oh, yeah, they always had a young core that was nice. It was expected to happen. It was not. People did not think that this was going to happen. In fact, I think that there was a lot more pessimism about whether this would happen rather than optimism. And that's why when people try to credit Troy Weaver, the past GM, for some of this success, I really push back against it because, yes, he drafted some of these guys, but people wouldn't be feeling this good about the players he drafted if not for Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff bringing in the guys that actually made them better and made them play up to their standards. Having Malik out there to have spacing with Cade helped take his game to another level. Having an actual NBA level 4 that can space the floor and actually guard on the other end some bigger guys and take off some of that half-court responsibility. And Tobias really took this team to another level, helped take Cade to another level. Having the right vets and having an actual team around them is what made you feel, okay, these guys are actually good. So I thought this past offseason, Trajan Langdon did an absolutely fantastic job getting the right vets in here that want to be in Detroit, that want to be with the Pistons, that love the city. I know Malik's family has ties to the city. I know Tobias met his wife here when he was with the Pistons in 2015. So they have ties to the city. They love it here, which I think is big time too. And I think all that plays into, you can have a talented young core, but if you don't have the guys around them, they will fail to hit their potential and they will just flare out. And we see that happen all the time. Guys that are talented don't ever actually reach what you think of them because they just weren't put in the right situation. And it was looking scary there for a second that that's where the Pistons were heading, but Trajan and JB did a good job getting the right people around them to stop that from happening.
Yeah, it definitely feels like teams like that have been through the lottery ringer like over and over again. Like I would say this about the Magic's rebuild under Rob Hennigan. Like they had Victor Oladipo, who became an all-star. Nikola Vucevic became an all-star. Tobias Harris was on those early Magic teams. They had Aaron Gordon, who we just saw in the Western Conference Finals was an indispensable, or in the Western Conference semifinals was an indispensable player for a championship level Nuggets team, helped them win a title. It's all about coaching, like, Jacques, all due respect to Jacques Vaughn, Monty Williams. They've had success in James Borrego. They've had success elsewhere, but they weren't the right coaches for those situations. There wasn't enough of the right veterans. There wasn't enough confidence. Chemistry just feels like such a strange mix. And when you hit it, you hit it really, really, really well. What's, just to bring the back half of the conversation over to the Magic. I know a lot of Magic fans look at what the Pistons did last year, because the Pistons were not a great 3-point shooting team when they won 14 games. You would expect that. Like, you're when you're bad, you're bad. You're bad at everything typically.
Yes.
I don't think that's rocket science. The Magic this year, obviously they've got the defense. We'll talk a little bit more about how the Magic and Pistons match up or face up in a little bit. But their team's very based on their defense. That's kind of the core of their identity, their physicality. But what seemed to propel the Pistons forward this year was their 3-point shooting and all the quality shooting they added in the offseason. Look, Malik Beasley, led the league in 3-point field goal percentage this year?
He ended up being second to Anthony Edwards in 3-point makes.
And more than that was just a volume shooter. And I think a lot of Magic fans look at what the Pistons did last offseason as a model for how Orlando needs to approach this offseason. To just, they have the base, they have the talent base, and Orlando, obviously a little more advanced. They had a bad season and won 41 games this year. A little bit more advanced perhaps, but they need that injection of offense. Just when you look at this Magic team, do you see them needing to have the kind of summer the Pistons had how obviously not so similar because of where they are in the standings, but how similar of a position are the Magic in to where the Pistons were last year offensively?
Yeah, I think the Magic they're one of the more interesting teams to me that I watch from a distance, because they have you think that they'd have these two guys that are super talented, and you think that you have your core there. But their offense has just been so bad. And it's like, how is it possible for you to have Paolo and Franz and be this bad offensively? And I know they desperately need shooting. I think obviously their defense is great, but they need some shooting to space the floor out for some of these guys and hit some of these open threes. My question for the Magic, that I'm sure we'll end up talking more about the Magic, like you said, later on in a second. But my question for the Magic is, and it's kind of like where you take this next step is, it feels like the Magic have really built and they got KCP, and I feel like that was just,
it just didn't work. Look, sometimes things don't work. I fully KCP is too good of a shooter not to bounce back a little bit. Like maybe he
sounds like the perfect signing. I thought that
Everyone
it was the perfect signing.
Yeah. It just and we're going to get into this, what comes next. Because injuries were just such a huge part of the story for the Magic this season. But it's like you said, the Pistons went from one of the worst offensive teams in the league to average. And just being average makes you a significantly better team, especially with the young talent that you have. And, like you said, the shooting unlocked another level to Cade, just like I think the playoff experience and going through the first playoff season, is going to unlock another level to Cade as well. But I want to talk about, we talked a lot about what made the Pistons so great. I want to give a warning to the Pistons on what the Magic learned about what comes next after that first playoff season. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Khahil. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce that name a lot. Crew's the coolest dude in the world. Don't want to mess that up. Let's take a quick break from our conversation for a quick word from our friends over at Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. Underwear can be uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about. I'm reading this ad independently without Koo in the room because it's uncomfortable to talk around people. But comfortable underwear is amazing. And Skims changes the underwear game completely. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with their perfect balance of comfort and style. I was not a brief person until Skims came on board with Locked On. Yeah, they sent us some samples, and frankly, I've been hooked. I've ordered a couple more after that. I'm no longer, I'm slowly phasing my boxers out. I'm going briefs, and Skims is a big reason why, because they're just so comfortable, easy to move around in, and so great. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcasts in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, joined by Khahil of Locked On Pistons. Appreciate him for being on the show. We talked in our last segment about how the Pistons completely changed their culture and are now considered one of the best young teams in the league. Very much their season last year, and I think a lot of Magic fans were very happy for the Pistons. We get it, how difficult it is being at the bottom of the standings and not having a future, to all of a sudden seeing a clear vision forward and being a perennial playoff team. We were very, very happy for the Pistons. They had the season last year that the Magic had, where winning was new. It was exciting. Like everyone was feeling good. Now comes the pressure. Yep. Now comes okay, you did it once. Now you got to do it again. And not only do you got to do it again, you got to do more. The Magic went to 7 games in their playoff series. I don't know how Detroit talked, and maybe this is the first place to start, but exit interviews the day after they lost to the Cavs last year, to a man, every single player said, our goal next year is to get home court advantage. We didn't win a single road game in the playoffs. We need home court advantage to get out of the first round. We're going to the second round. Like that was the talk from day one. They set the bar for what success was. And obviously they didn't hit it for a variety of reasons. Let's start here then. What were the Pistons talking about during exit interviews as they began to reflect on their season and their playoff series?
It's basically the exact same thing you guys are saying. The second round, want to be a top 4 team, top 5 team. We, took the Knicks to 6 games. Oh, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. No reason we shouldn't be in the second round next year. The goal is to win a playoff series and keep building upon there. But I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. I think me and you are going to be in the same area, and hopefully both. I think Magic fans obviously probably feel this way now because of the season you guys had. But hopefully the Pistons fans, after hearing this conversation and hearing it from somebody who went through this, some people start to change some of their tunes, because I think I feel like the Pistons are in danger of making a mistake that the Magic made, and Pistons fans are sizing themselves up for disappointment if this is the route they go. I think you need to be really careful, because like you mentioned, the most fun is when there's no expectations, a young team that learns how to win. Now, you don't care if they lose in the first round. It's like, oh, this is a lot of fun. We're seeing these guys grow up before our eyes.
Getting there was gravy. Like having a competitive series. Like I remember facing the Cavs. Like I had it as a 6-game series. I thought Cavs in 6. And I was like, just being there, getting a few wins, like that's exactly what the team needed. I like last year I had the Magic as a play-in team. Just getting the 5 seed was just like, whoa, like that's more than enough. There's definitely a feeling of you're just, not that the players were just happy to be there. Obviously, they deserved and earned a little bit more than that, but there is definitely a feeling as a fan base of we're kind of just happy to be here. Anything extra you give us is just gravy. And now comes the hard part of, okay, you did that once, you got to do it again. And the Magic season this year, let's start here. The Magic, we were talking a little bit before we aired about what the offseason was. The Magic opted last offseason with all the cap room that they had to bring in a big player in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to help alleviate the shooting issues. Obviously didn't work out, but that was the idea. Everyone seemed to love the idea. And then they just re-upped all their own guys. They really believed hard in their own players. And, some of it was warranted. Some of it was maybe premature. A lot of it was setting their books up for when they didn't have cap room anymore and they were suddenly way over the salary cap. Like I did an episode on Tuesday about the Magic being potentially a first apron team in 2026. Certainly by 2027, they'll be a first apron team. So their money's getting a little tight, and I think they were planning a little bit for that as well. They essentially ran it back and said, like, let's see how far we can take this and then figure out where to move. And then 5 games into the season, Paolo Banchero goes down with a torn oblique. A month later, Franz Wagner goes down with a torn oblique. And all of a sudden, they're just scrambling to stay afloat with all the injuries. And so it's been really hard to assess this Magic season because on one hand, with the way the East shook out, if the Magic were healthy, and I'd be curious if you'd agree with this or not, if the Magic were healthy, I think they would have been in the conversation for the 4 seed with Indiana, Milwaukee, Detroit. I think it would have been a 4-team race for 4, 5, 6, and 7. Magic ended up 7th at 41 and 41, well behind Detroit, just well behind them. I honestly truly believe the Magic were a better team this year than they were last year. Just the injuries disrupted so many things, and they couldn't quite get themselves back on solid footing. If not for making the playoffs last year and having all that confidence, I think the Magic would have been in danger of being a tanking team and being like completely out of it. And so the playoff experience obviously helped, but they got too much adversity put in front of them to stick with their preseason goals.
Yeah, I think injuries definitely very much hurt your guys' season. And I think this is like, as much as like you mentioned, like the season the Pistons just had, the season the Magic had 2 years ago, I still think that this offseason they're very much in the same position and still are trying to answer some of the same questions because the Pistons lost Ivy in January. And now they're feeling like, okay, like the question is, okay, well, just returning Ivy and being healthy, is that going to be enough? Do you just bring everybody back and just say, oh, getting healthy, that will be enough to launch yourself into the top 5, top 4? And I'm interested to see where you stand with the Magic and what they do, because I'm of the belief that the Pistons cannot just run it back. I feel like getting comfortable is how you take step backs, and just assuming development is linear is how you end up taking step backs and things don't go the right way. And I think this is another situation where I'm actually really happy that the Pistons jumped to 6 for this conversation specifically, because I just recorded, like, I think it was yesterday, and said, there's going to be teams, this East is wide open. There's going to be so many teams that say this East is wide open, we're going to try to get better. Like, this last offseason, did anyone think the Pistons would jump to 6 and be one of the teams contending for a playoff spot? No. No one would have thought that. There's going to be a team from Toronto, Philly, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, and
someone always jumps up. Always jumps up.
Someone's going to jump up, maybe even 2 or 3 teams. Like, Philly dealt with injuries all year. Could Charlotte get better this year? Maybe. Like, could Brooklyn go get Giannis?
With Brandon Ingram.
We didn't.
Brandon Ingram, all-star. As much as people hate on Brandon Ingram, he's an all-star level player. They got Scotty Barnes still. They got some solid vets. They got Emmanuel quickly. They got RJ Barrett. They got some talent on that team. Yeah, so like I'm looking at the Eastern Conference, and I know right now, seeing these teams and how they played last year, it's like, oh, no way they're gonna jump. I see like maybe 2 to 3 teams that I could see jumping and being like, we're competing for this year. We want to do this. And if you're a team, at least this is my opinion, if you're a team that gets to where the Pistons or the Magic are at, and we're like, oh, we're good, we're just gonna keep getting better, we don't need to do anything, while every team behind you is like, we're just gonna get better. That's how you end up getting passed up by the teams behind you that are trying to get better while you got comfortable and said, we'll just run it back. Sometimes it works out. I know the easiest example, and I don't even think this is a clean example, but I see the example everyone uses is OKC.
even though OKC has made trades like for Caruso and they, stuff like that.
They did.
But like
they got Hartenstein last year, and look how important he was.
Yeah, the idea that they just completely ran it back and like didn't add anything, I think is false. But I know they're like the cleanest example that most people throw at you. I think it's a mistake to just try to run stuff back and not try to improve, because every team behind you is not going to just stay in place. Or like I said this a few weeks ago as well. Like Detroit should be looking at Orlando, because Orlando's not going to be a 7th seed. They are going to get better, and assuming that you just running it back and Orlando's just going to be like, well, we're not going to do anything. We'll see what happens next year. Instead of actively trying to get better, like that's how you get leapfrogged. So especially in the open East, I think it's going to be an arms race. And if you're just not engaging in it, I feel like you're just going to get left behind.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson the Magic learned, and the biggest lesson the Magic probably should have taught everyone around the league, is you can't, every season's going to be different.
Yes.
Like you're going to get a different challenge. Someone's going to get hurt at the wrong time. Some chemistry is not going to be exactly the same. There's always the problem of more that Pat Riley talks about. Contracts are different. Someone gets paid more. They expect to do a little bit more. They're given a little bit more. Coach has an idea that doesn't work. Something is different about every single season. You cannot expect every season, like you said, to progress linearly. Players don't improve linearly. They work on something in the offseason. Jonathan Isaac's a great example. Like, I still think Jonathan Isaac is thought of as a defensive game changer throughout the league. Like that's his reputation. You can still see it in the numbers. You can still see it when he plays. He made the decision, with the Magic's blessing and with the Magic's support, to put on a ton of weight this season. He went from like 230 to 250 in the offseason to try and be ready to play more center. And it clearly didn't work. And Isaac talked about it throughout the season and said after the season ended, it was a mistake, or essentially said it was a mistake. I was sluggish. It didn't work for me. I'm working all offseason to get my weight back down. Players make those mistakes. Star players make those mistakes. They add something to their game. It's not the thing that maybe makes them better in the short term, but helps them in the long term. You don't know how everything kind of meshes together. Like, honestly, I would argue part of why the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope thing didn't work for the Magic, and I don't think it would have worked as much as the Magic wanted at the end, because they need volume shooting, and he's just not enough of a volume shooter. It's part of the reason I don't think it worked is Paolo Banchero got hurt 5 games into the season. If he gets hurt 20 games into the season, maybe the Magic have a little bit more of a rhythm. Maybe the Magic offense is kind of clicking and finding itself, and then they face that shock, but everyone's kind of in rhythm. The fact that it happened so early, I think, had a bigger effect. Whereas, like, again, the Jaden Ivey injury, obviously that happened in a game against the Magic. It was devastating for everybody that was on the floor, that was watching. That happened mid-season, where everyone kind of understood their roles, understood how to play each other. That happens 5 games into the season, very different outcome. And so you can't assume anything. Steve Clifford used to always say this when he was coaching the Magic. You start from scratch at the beginning of every year. Like, yes, maybe you pick up things quicker because you know how to play with each other and how to play off of each other, but you can't assume you're just going to pick up from scratch, like right at the start of the season. You do the best you can to be prepared, but you have to rebuild everything every year. And you don't always know how it's going to shake out. Like Kuz said, though, the East is wide open, and the Magic and Pistons certainly are 2 of the teams that are like that meme of the guy, like rubbing his hands together, licking his lips, ready to take advantage. Let's talk about our 2027 Eastern Conference Finals preview, where the Magic and Pistons fit in the East future. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. Let's take another quick break from our conversation for a quick word from our friends over at Car Gurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With more than 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. When you need a deal you can trust, Car Gurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. They have price drop alerts so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, the in-depth vehicle details give you peace of mind before stepping onto any lot. Knowledge is power. We all hate going to the car dealership because they have all the power. Take some back with some knowledge from Car Gurus. It's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's Car Gurus, CarGurus.com, cargurus.com. Once again, this is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, joined by Khahil of Locked On Pistons. The other point I wanted to make before we get into this next part, you mentioned like the Magic being a little bit of a warning sign and standing still. And I do think that was one of the mistakes the Magic made last offseason. Orlando had several needs, and they tried to fill one of them. They desperately needed some three-point shooting with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But I believed coming out of the series with the Cavs, and you can go back in my archives and find the episode because I know I talked about it extensively. They needed another guy who could attack off the dribble. And they needed another guy who could help Paolo and Franz just play off the ball a little bit more, just ease that pressure. And that, maybe they were depending on Jalen Suggs to do that. They left that completely ignored. And I think for young teams especially, the biggest thing you learn in the playoffs is what you need. And I think the Magic left that need unaddressed, and it was a need throughout the season. It's one of the reasons why the offense was so poor. They just didn't have enough playmaking creation. And especially when Paolo and Franz, their two main playmakers and creators, went down with injuries. That continued to be an issue for the team throughout the season. Before we get into the East at large, what to you was the big lesson for the Pistons from their series with the Knicks?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about this on Twitter the other day. I think, like I said just a few minutes ago, I think the Pistons and Magic are in literally the exact same position right now. I think they're trying to answer the exact same questions and should be peaking at the exact same times because of the age of their players, etc. But the Pistons, I thought your point is 100% correct. They walk away from these playoffs. I personally feel like the biggest downfall for teams this age, amongst fans, amongst front office, etc., the biggest, honestly, you could call it a drug, is hope. Hope is the most addictive drug and the biggest reason for failure amongst these type of teams. Because, like you said, Magic walk away from their playoff series. Oh, well, we need another self-creator. We need someone else to attack off the dribble, create advantages and allow other players to move off ball a little bit. Oh, we have the answer. Jalen Suggs, he'll do it. Well, like, how realistic was it for you? Was it hope, or was it actually like, okay, he can do it? I feel like it's the same thing in the Pistons regard. Pistons walk out of these playoffs with multiple blatant. It was a fun season. They took the Knicks to 6. They could have won the series. Like, all that is true. Both things can be true. That can be true, and you also can walk away saying, yeah, okay, we can clearly see the issues and some of the things they need to improve on. They need another self-creator in the half court for the Detroit Pistons. They have no one else that can create within the half court besides Cade. Is Jaden Ivey actually the answer to that, or is that just hope? Is that just because he's a young guy and you're hoping he's actually that? They were one of the worst isolation teams in the NBA this year. They just could not get a bucket against mismatches like that. Cade's not even that kind of player. He's fine at it, but he's not that type of player, really. They need someone else who can create in isolation. People think Ivey's going to be it. Well, he was in the 7th percentile in that this past year. Is it fair to say Ivey will be the answer, or is that just hope? Is that just hopium? Like, that's the problem. They need guys that can shoot threes and play defense, not guys that can play defense and can't shoot, and guys who can shoot and can't play defense. Like, that's what they need. That's what they need.
Guys who can do more than one thing. Like, it's like, yes. It's so cliche. Like, yeah, you want good players, make your team better. But it's like, no, like, the way the league works now is you have to have guys who can do everything, or teams are just going to pick apart the guy that can't do the thing that you want him to do.
Right.
You gotta kind of pick your risks. Like, I feel like, the way like the fandom is these days, is everyone's going for the big fish. And I've seen the Magic rumored for big fish. I've seen the Pistons rumored for big fish. And there's like a Goldilocks zone you got to go for here, where you got to push some chips in and get some skin in the game to improve your roster. But if you push your chips in too far, you get overextended and you become the Hawks with DeJounte Murray, or you become the Bucks with Damian Lillard. And look, I'm a big believer the Bucks made the right move going for Damian Lillard. It was the thing they had to do. It didn't work out for several reasons, or hasn't worked out for several reasons, but that was the inevitable thing they had to do. Or you get like the Knicks with Mikal Bridges and it works out. Like there's a
lot of luck plays into it.
Yes. And like, especially in the playoffs now, like it feels to me that you can get further in the playoffs as a lower seed than ever before.
Yep.
And so being as much as everyone's like, as much as both the Magic and Pistons might be like, we need home court advantage. Do you? Like,
I mean, the Pistons didn't win a single game at home. All of their games won were in New York. So it's like
Orlando hasn't won a playoff game on the road in the 2 seasons they've been in the playoffs. So maybe the Magic do need home court advantage. But having said that, it's just like, if your team's good enough, it's good enough. It'll find a way. And these playoff and like, that's something I relearned or learned again in the playoff series last year, and even in the series against the Celtics. And I'm sure you would say this in the series with the Knicks. It's the margins between winning and losing in the playoffs are so tiny. Like the narrative changes off of a shot, off of a loose ball that gets picked up. Like the Magic gets swept if Wendell Carter doesn't knock the ball off of Derek White or whoever it was in game 3. Like it's amazing to me how small the margin is between success or failure at these levels.
No, yeah. I mean, if Cade hits that, he had a chance in I believe it was game 3.
If that foul was called, that should have been called.
Yeah, like even that, right after he misses the shot. If Cade hits that pull-up midi that he usually hits, Pistons are up 2-1. Who knows what happens? If THA has that foul called, he hits one free throw, like who knows what happens? Like the margins are very, very close. And like you mentioned, I feel like part of the conversation that gets lost, I know, I mean, you've talked about this like before, like squad shows, whatever. I know, and I've seen a lot of the conversation in the Magic community, like, especially earlier in the year, was like, is it Paolo and Franz, or is it Franz or Paolo? Like, who is the guy? Do they need to move off of one of them? And who knows? Maybe that ends up being the case, but most likely,
it's like 4 or 5 steps down the road.
Yes. Like, you don't have to, like you mentioned, there's a Goldilocks zone. It doesn't getting better when you discuss like, okay, these young guys, this young team should not just stay the same. They should get better. Does that mean trade Paolo or Franz for Kevin Durant? Does that mean trade Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson for Katie, I guess, whatever names out there? No, but does that mean, like you mentioned earlier, go out and get a Hardenstein, go out and get an Alex Caruso, go out and make these, improvements on your rotation from rotation 6 to 10, from rotation 5 to 10? Yes, you should. I feel like the lesson that the Magic learned this past year, and I hope that the Pistons look at the Magic and several other teams, not just the Magic have done this.
Yeah.
Multiple teams have. That the Pistons look at it and say, okay, we don't need to trade our young guys for some big piece right now, but you should constantly be every offseason trying to improve your margins. Every single season, you should be constantly improving your 7th, 8th, 9th spot in your rotation. Unless you're the Boston Celtics, you have a super god team and you don't need to do
they're
that.
about to break that team apart. So,
yeah.
So they're going to need to do that pretty soon too.
But like, you should constantly be improving the margins. Like, that should always be the case. You should never just be standing pat with that, even if you stand pat with your young guys, which makes sense. But I want to ask you this.
Okay.
Before we wrap up, so you meant, like, obviously the East is wide open, and I totally could see the Pistons and Magic matching up in a 2027 Eastern Conference Finals. Their best players are all around the same age. Cade, Paolo, Franz, whichever one you want to do, all around the exact same age. They're all around the same caliber of player. They are going to peak at the right times, and they are really great players. Boston's sounds like they're going to shed it all away. It's looking likely that Giannis pieces out. Maybe he stays in the East, but it's looking like Milwaukee is going to be no more. So the assumption is, okay, well, Cleveland, New York, Indiana, like, that's 3 teams, and those guys aren't world beaters. Do you feel like, from the Orlando Magic perspective, do you feel like it's an arms race right now in the East? Because I feel like, from my perspective, I'm looking at like Miami, who could go after KD. I even Atlanta, like, I feel like Atlanta might try and make a move to get someone next to Trey. Toronto, you mentioned them. They're going to get BI back. Maybe they try and make another move. Brooklyn might be the ones that get Giannis. Philly's going to come back. What if Embiid's healthy? Like, I feel like there's going to be so many teams in the East that are also thinking the same way the Pistons and Magic are, like, oh my God, the East is open. And they're going to be like, okay, we're swinging for it. And I feel like it's going to end up being an arms race.
Honestly, I don't know if I would describe it as an arms race, because I think the Magic aren't necessarily looking at their neighbors, because, like, look, Paolo and Franz aren't going anywhere. Like, they're like, they got the hard part done. I remember I was actually on the train back from Miami after the Magic played the Heat in January, lost a double overtime game. That game, it was the game after the Magic played the Pistons, and I was listening to Locked On Pistons actually on that train ride back, recapping that Magic Pistons game, and you made the point, like, the Magic kind of have what the Pistons don't right now, is that second guy, that second all-star to galvanize the team. And so to me, the Magic kind of have the hard part done. Their task now is to figure out, do they have the right number 3 in Jalen Suggs, and can we make 4 through 9 or 4 through 10 more reliable offensively? Essentially, like, if the Magic can maintain their defense as a top 5 defense and their offense is merely average, like 15th, the Magic haven't had an offense outside the bottom 10 since Dwight Howard in 2012. It's bad. It's like the Celtics reporters were in the media room after game 3 and were just like, that was one of the worst basketball games I've ever seen. And, like, all of us Magic reporters, like, looked at them and were just like, that's every game, guys. Like, that's how this is. Like, and even John Corrales used it in his article and saying, like, they're like war reporters who've seen some things. We've seen some things in Orlando, a lot of things. I feel like it's not necessarily an arms race in that respect, where the Magic have to go get Trae Young because someone's going to get Giannis or someone's going to get this player or that player. I see it more of an arms race because not only the East, but I think the entire league is seeing how valuable some of these players are just in the playoffs. Like, Oklahoma City nearly lost after a 60 plus wins they had. They nearly lost because they couldn't shoot the ball effectively enough. Like, the Nuggets were just like, Lou Dort, shoot the ball as much as you want. Go for it. The Nuggets didn't have great outside shooting. Like, Michael Porter was hurt. They were leaving Julian Strawther open. He had the big game 6, but you could just kind of see, like, when you get deeper into the playoffs, making sure you don't have a weak link, making defenses compromise and make decisions. Like, even the Magic's, like, vaunted defense, they had to make compromises when they faced Boston. They had to decide, this is what we're going to give up. And if they make that shot, so be it. We're not giving up threes. We're not going to let them shoot a ton of threes on us. We can't keep up if they do that. We'll let them shoot mid-rangers. We'll switch and let Porzingis post up as much as he wants. And if that's how they beat us, that's how they beat us. The Celtics, for as good as everyone thinks the Magic played defensively, and I think they did played well defensively, Boston had a 117 offensive rating in that series. They shot, if the Celtics had shot the way they shot against Orlando against the Knicks, the Celtics would be in the conference finals. They didn't shoot the same. So I think it's an arms race for these quality role players, especially with the salary cap restrictions and how quickly I think these mid-tier players are going to turn over because of all these restrictions. Like, I think, like, Orlando fans are obsessed with Anthony Simons, and I'll just use him as a shorthand example. I think there's a market for Anthony Simons. I don't think Orlando is the only team going after Anthony Simons. And I think the fear, if you're the Magic, and I imagine it's the same fear that you're kind of speaking of, is you're going to be left holding the bag, and it's musical chairs, and you end up not getting a seat at the table or not getting one of those guys that you need because everybody is going for him. And for whatever reason, whether it's you weren't willing to give up that young player you like, that draft pick, that extra draft pick you want to hold on to, whatever it is, like, I think that's the game now in the NBA, is making sure you're not caught without a chair when the music stops.
No, yeah, I completely agree. You got to get the right role players. You have to be improving upon these margins and improving among these areas that you are. When you make the playoffs and you see a deficiency in front of you and it loses you a series, you must address that if you want to take the next step forward the next year. It has to be addressed. And like you mentioned, it doesn't need to be an arms race for KD or a top superstar, but even the team, like, and we've thrown them out there like 5 times already, but even the team that everyone goes to is, oh, they built it organically. They grew, they didn't make these big trades. They went out and got key players that they're not winning. They're not in the Western Conference Finals right now if they don't get Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, that's not happening. So you have to get these quality role players, and they may not be stars, but they'll be star in their roles and really help you take it to the next level. You have to have those.
Absolutely. It's going to be this summer is going to be wild. I don't think, like, fans are looking at the big names, and there's going to be a few big names that hit the market probably. It's going to be wild up and down the board. Like, there's going to be a lot of movement in the NBA this summer, and I'm sure the Magic and Pistons will be at the center of it. Khahil, it is always good to talk to you, man. Locked On Pistons, one of my favorite listens when I get around the Locked On Podcast Network. I as you mentioned, we will be seeing plenty more of each other, I think, in the very near future. So I will sign off as I always sign off. See you in the Eastern Conference Finals, bud.
I'll see you there.
I want to thank Khahil once again for hopping on the show, talking to us a little bit about what the Pistons experienced this season. Very happy to see teams that have not been in the playoffs for a long time get that moment in the sun. We understand it here in Orlando. Such a breakthrough moment. And again, I want the Magic Pistons rivalry back. It was fun when it happened in the early aughts, even though the Pistons probably did not think so much about the Magic. I've heard such great things about Little Caesars Arena. I wouldn't mind spending a playoff series up there either, but that's neither here nor there. Great to see the Pistons back in the mix. Magic and Pistons will be fighting each other for a very, very long time. Like I said, 2027 Eastern Conference Finals preview here on the show today. Thanks to Khahil for stopping in and talking with me today. You can find his podcast at Locked On Pistons. You can find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD and on Blue Sky at PhilipRR. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, all the Still podcasts to your podcast-enabled device. You can also find us on YouTube. Search for Locked On Magic. We have actually crossed 4,000 subscribers. Truly appreciate all of you who have subscribed. Tell a friend. Make it your first listen, as always. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content where I'm doing my player evaluations, check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done making Locked On Magic your first listen of the day, go make the Locked On NBA Big Board Show your second listen of the day. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. We'll be back tomorrow where we'll talk about why the Magic are not so far away from being a conference finalist and why that window to be a conference finalist has perhaps already opened or is going to open very, very soon. The urgency the Magic need to act coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.